Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host as always. Joining me tonight is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Hey, I finally figured out how to do the intro correctly. So yeah, doing well. How about you?
I'm doing all right. I'm still getting over a cold, so apologies for the nasally tone today, but it hasn't been too bad yet, knock on wood. So I'm doing all right. But today we are going to have a fun conversation for you guys. Obviously, our Tuesday shows are normally reserved for our film takeaways. Charges are on a bye week, so there's no film takeaways to be had. So what we wanted to kind of do is take some stock after the bye week, and so we're going to do that in the form of the Chargers overall and where they stand in the AFC, and then some players who we think could be primed for a much improved, post bye stretch. Players who we're a little concerned about and things like that. And then, as the title states, we will discuss what we think the Chargers record is going to be at the end of the season. So should be a fun conversation for you guys. Let us know your thoughts here in the chat or in the comments. Obviously, make sure like, subscribe, review the podcast if you're listening to it. All of that does really help continue to grow the show. All right, so let's start with this conversation. I should say this as well. Max watching live from Florida. If you're in Florida or anywhere in southern Mexico listening to this, we appreciate you guys. Hopefully everything is safe. I saw a thing on Twitter today that said this is tracking to be the worst hurricane in U.S. history, which is kind of crazy considering all the damage that some of the other ones have done. So if you're in Florida, stay safe. I don't know what evacuation plans there are or anything like that. But I can't imagine having that trajectory head towards my house and my family's house. So praying for anybody who's down there, sending good thoughts. Hopefully you guys can stay safe.
Yeah, please stay safe. Do what you got to do. Evacuate, whatever you got to do. And yeah, just wishing for the best. It's not looking good. Obviously, like you said, it's different when we're over here on the West Coast. We don't really experience stuff like this. We don't experience stuff like this, and I can't imagine going through it. So best of luck to everyone who's over there right now.
Yeah, I mean, we have the wildfires, and I mean, it's our natural disaster, but
Sure.
I can't imagine dealing with hurricane season every single year. So hopefully everybody is staying safe. Hopefully everybody who is watching this and is a baseball fan, I hope your team wins. I guess I don't really care about baseball, so hope both sides have fun. All right, Tyler. It was a kind of a crazy day in the AFC today. A crazy day in the NFL in general. So we wanted to kind of take stock of where the Chargers are at. Obviously, they have played 4 games. It's been 5 weeks in the NFL. But at the same time, the bye week just kind of creates this natural check-in point. The Chargers are doing a lot of self-scouting, so we kind of wanted to do that as well for the AFC. As it currently stands, the 2-2 Chargers would be 7th in the AFC playoff picture. The teams in front of them are the Pittsburgh Steelers, Denver Broncos, and then the Jets, who just fired their head coach, are right behind them, followed by the Raiders, Dolphins, Colts, Titans, Browns, Patriots, Jaguars, and Cincinnati Bengals. If you would have predicted that the Cincinnati Bengals would be last in the AFC after 5 weeks, congratulations to you. So it's just kind of been that season. So Tyler, we'll start from a general sense here. What do you make of like the AFC in general, and how are you kind of sorting this conference out right now?
Yeah, forget the whole, AFC picture is loaded and all that before the season. Now, there's 12 teams that should and could make the playoffs because they're all so good. It's really half of the teams, and thankfully the Chargers are in that, half-ish. Half the teams, the 7 teams that are okay, like these guys can make the playoffs, and you think they have a pretty good shot at it. They are mostly all playoff contenders. Chiefs are obviously the crown jewel at 5-0. Shocker. But the rest of the group is such a dumpster fire. I mean, Jets, you just mentioned, disaster. Raiders after that, they're ready to ship Devontae Adams. Christian Wilkins is now out indefinitely. The Dolphins, I have no idea when they're getting a quarterback back and who's coming back and when that's happening. They're reeling right now. The Colts are dangerous, I guess. You see them have some good games and then some not so good ones. The Titans, do they have a quarterback? The most dangerous team is probably the Bengals, and they're 1-4. They might be out of the playoff picture altogether. So it's a really, really weird year for the AFC. So thankfully the Chargers have their head coach, they have their quarterback, even if he is coming off of an injury and working through that. But you really feel like the Chargers can easily be one of the 8 best teams the rest of the way because everything else is kind of a mess.
Yeah, and the Bengals you mentioned, they're third in offensive EPA per play right now and fourth in success rate, and it just does not matter. Like this is probably like statistically the best offense that they have ever had under Joe Burrow, and they're 1-4, and that's because their defense is so bad. Their special teams, I think, is like 26 in special teams DVOA. So it's kind of a little reminiscent of like that 2010 Chargers season where their offense was just like awesome and it didn't matter. So the Bengals, they do have a relatively easy schedule, according to Unpredictable, which measures future strength of schedule based off of Super Bowl odds and things like that. The Bengals do have the 27th most difficult schedule, aka the 5th easiest schedule. So they could theoretically ride the ship here and make it interesting. But we saw all those years where the Chargers started 1-4, 1-3, 0-4, whatever. It's so difficult to get into the playoff picture after you start the season like that. So they're going to make it interesting. The Chargers play them after the trade deadline, so there's a chance that maybe they kind of embrace seller's mode if they're not like fully in the picture. Maybe they do decide to trade T. Higgins, for example. So what does that look like for their chances is very interesting. But there's a lot of bad after the Chargers, right? You mentioned the Jets and the Raiders situation. The Miami Dolphins, without Tua, have the worst offense in the league by basically any metric that you can think of, which is kind of crazy. I'm not a Tua apologist, obviously, but that kind of speaks to his value and the value of not having a great quarterback. Although they do have Tyler Huntley, I wish he were playing better for my own propaganda, but he is not. So there's not a lot of competition. Like I think the Jets are interesting enough because of the roster, because of the defense, that maybe with an interim head coach that they can kind of stay competitive. But it's a dumpster fire. Listening to all the reporting today on the firing of Robert Salah, I could not believe all of the mixed messaging. There's this word out that like Nathaniel Hackett is going to be demoted but maintain his status as the offensive coordinator. And like, what is the point of that? Just fire him. And Aaron Rodgers himself has been like the 20th best quarterback ish, depending on like what metric you're looking at. So I think he's like 26th in EPA per play behind Bo Nix right now, which is not great.
Woo.
So the teams behind the Chargers are kind of a disaster. The teams ahead of the Chargers, I don't really know about. I think we kind of all trust the Pittsburgh Steelers to maintain their status in that regard, just because Mike Tomlin is like that. But they have a very difficult schedule up ahead because they haven't played any division games. Their last 8 weeks of the season are all divisional games. They have to play the Ravens twice. They play the Bengals twice. They play the Browns twice. Granted, the Browns are awful, but it's still a divisional game. Like, so it's just the Chargers are in a really good spot right now from a playoff perspective. And I know it's very early in the season still, but if they can kind of right the ship on offense here, their chances to make the playoffs, I think, are pretty good.
Yeah, I think they're full steam ahead to obviously not win the division, but they certainly can make the playoffs given who's in front of them, because it's not just the AFC, the NFC, some issues there. I don't know. I think the Chargers are in a really good spot to make the postseason. How much they do, how healthy they are, I don't know. Yeah. But even with the current roster and the way the health is right now, they're still better than a bunch of teams on their schedule. So feel pretty good. And obviously Jesse Minter's defense is a big part of that.
Yeah, so like we talked about previously, they're currently second in EPA per play, second in success rate on defense, which is crazy. There's a lot of people talking about like trade acquisitions. I kind of think if the Chargers are in it, and I think they should be, that they should go after some more defensive help at the trade deadline to try and make that strength stronger. And I think the offense is just kind of naturally going to improve based off of getting healthier. They're very young. They haven't played a lot together, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of a different conversation. But looking at the Chargers schedule here, the next few games they play, obviously the Broncos, Cardinals, Saints, who just lost Derek Carr. So they might be playing the Saints with a backup quarterback. And then there's the Browns situation, the Titans situation, and then the Bengals, who we just talked about. So that's a very manageable stretch of games for the Chargers to be able to, right the ship on offense, win some of these games. I don't think they're going to go undefeated in that stretch. But if they can go 4-2 in that stretch, and then the rest of the AFC just continues to be what it is right now, that's just really going to set the Chargers up very nicely for the back half of the season.
Yeah, I've totally forgot about the Derek Carr thing. I will see. I think it was oblique the day of. I don't know if that's changed at all. So we'll see. But I think the Saints are beatable.
Tom Pelissero said that he's going to at least miss the next 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So it could be more than that. The quote was he's going to miss some time, exactly, at least the next 2 weeks. We'll see. But the Saints have a lot of other issues besides the health of their quarterback also to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching the end of that Chiefs game, and I feel bad for the backup quarterback, but as soon as he went in, it was a quarterback hit every single drop back. Chris Jones, that group. Yeah. I can't believe the Chiefs found another defensive tackle. They turned into someone good. I think he was a undrafted free agent. Is it Wharton?
Tershawn Wharton.
Yep. Yeah, undrafted free agent. Just wreck and shop. Like I hate them.
Yeah. Yeah, the Saints were on their third string center in that game. Their third left guard. It was bad. Their backup right guard. It was tough. So that's a. I mean, we saw what that was like for the Chargers, and the Chargers still had, I think at least a couple starters in there, obviously, that are much better than what the Saints were dealing with. So, but yeah, man, I think there's a lot of negativity over the past couple of games, and I understand why that is the case, given how the offense has struggled to move the football. But I'm still kind of 50-50 about this particular week against the Broncos, and a lot of that will be determined like who exactly is playing. But even if the Chargers lose this weekend, they should be able to win at least their next 6 games before they play the Ravens, in my opinion. And they're not going to go 6-0 in those games.
Right.
But if they can go 5-1 and you lose the Broncos, then at that point you're talking about them being 7-4. And that's like very much on track to be a playoff team.
Yeah. I mean, so in that order, at Broncos, we'll see. That's been a we'll see game for forever. But Cardinals, barring a Kyler Murray explosion, again, I think so much of this way I'm looking at the schedule comes down to the Chargers defense, and frankly, they're way better than expected.
Right.
So it's helping a ton, even if the Chargers aren't gelling on offense by then. But Saints, who knows who's playing? Browns, who's the quarterback? Is Nick Chubb supposed to? He's not even really close to coming back, right? He's like if they make the postseason kind of.
He actually did return to practice this week, which is.
He did? I thought he was way further off.
Yeah, I think he was like a limited participant. And listen, the Browns have zero reason to rush that man back. But
give it 4 weeks.
Yeah.
5 weeks.
But even then, I mean, Deshaun Watson, have you seen all of the Deshaun Watson statistics?
Yeah, no, it's like he's like 20% worse than the worst quarterback or whatever it is. Everything.
If you isolate just the Browns quarterbacks of like the last 15 seasons, this 2024 version of Deshaun Watson is worse than all of them. Like worse than Brady Quinn, worse than Brandon Weeden, worse than Johnny Manziel. It's awful quarterback play in Cleveland right now. And so I don't know if it matters. Like if the Chargers have Slater and Alt healthy to protect against Myles Garrett and then defensive line, I just don't think it's going to matter because the quarterback situation in Cleveland is that bad.
Who's their backup?
It's Jameis. It's Jameis. If Jameis is playing in that game, I feel dicey about it, right? Like I think Jameis has, Jameis can galvanize those guys, I think, at a much higher rate. And their defense hasn't played at the same level as it did last year. Last year was like one of the best defenses of all time. They're still, I think, like 14th or 13th in defensive EPA per play.
Yeah.
But when you're a defense and you're looking across the sideline at that offense, it's so difficult to like consistently play at your level because you just don't have a chance. Like you essentially have to be perfect in order to give Deshaun Watson a chance to win the game. And so it's just the quarterback situation in Cleveland is awful. And if Jameis is playing, I might feel a little bit different because Cleveland is a tough place to play. They do have some nice pieces on offense. They do have a great defensive personnel. So if Watson's playing, that's a win in my opinion. But if Winston is playing, I might consider that more like a 50-50 matchup.
Yeah, that's dicey. I mean, we've seen not that Andy Dalton's been great, but against the Raiders, he was great. They injected him into the lineup, but it like changed the way the Panthers played on defense.
It changed the defense too. It wasn't just the offense. Yeah,
the whole team was galvanized by it, and they held their own the next week until late. I think against the Bengals, or some other team they played. Anyway, so hopefully that's not the week that they decide to make a switch. Hopefully it is Deshaun Watson because. Yeah, I'll take that. Worst quarterback in recent Browns history is bad. And I think someone said that the next worst quarterback was Watson last year.
Yep.
So
it's not great, Bob.
No, and if they want to trade Amari Cooper before then, hey, go for it.
Yeah. Listen, they deserve it for everything that they did to acquire that human being. But there's a few players on that roster that we would be very interested in. We talked about Greg Newsome before the season. He's still playing fantastic. He can play a slot, play outside. That would be great. They have a couple of defensive linemen that would be fun additions. Quinton Jefferson, for example, Amari Cooper. They have a good roster of pieces that if they were going to be sellers, I think they would have a lot of suitors to figure it out. So that should be fun. I think the other 50-50 game for me right now, just looking at it, is the Falcons game. Not necessarily because I think the Falcons are like this awesome team, but it's a 10 a.m. kick. It's in Atlanta. Kirk Cousins just threw for 500 yards. They're kind of getting into a rhythm. And we haven't really seen the Chargers defense play against a truly like top end wide receiver quarterback combination. Obviously, they played against Devontae Adams, but he did not have a top end quarterback.
Yeah.
So I am curious what this looks like over the next few weeks, where if they play a guy like Kirk Cousins and Drake London, or if they play obviously Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, what does that really look like? Again, I'm not saying that this is going to be a loss, but as Jorge points in the chat, it's kind of a sneaky matchup I'm concerned about for the Chargers.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a lot going into it, like you mentioned, at Falcons, the early time. Again, full credit to how the Chargers played the Chiefs. I don't want to now just move the goalposts for the Chargers defense, my expectations for them, but like Cousins, London, heck, there are 3 other receivers on that Falcons group. They were all contributing. Just watching the Falcons play offense, I liked the structure of how most of it was playing. We'll see how their line is by then. I don't know if Dahlman's out for longer, but London, Pitts, Robinson, pretty good.
It's a good offensive group. Their defense, not so much, but that offensive group I think can present some challenges for the Chargers. So that's one of the other 50-50 games that I have penciled in for the Chargers, kind of with a question mark. What has anything changed for you in terms of like a game that you had as a loss before the season or a win before the season, and now you're switching that?
Not really. I mean, the ones we've talked about, the Bucks, I'm still wait and see on because I thought they would be worse on offense given the departure of Canales, but they've still kind of maintained their ability to perform pretty well on offense. So that makes it a bit trickier for me. By the time we get to that point, I think we'll know where the Chargers are at offensively and defensively. Like we'll officially know where this defense really settles in after many games. So we'll see. But Ravens, I still feel is a loss. I don't remember if I picked the Chargers to beat the Bengals or not initially. I think I picked them to beat them, but now I'm more confident in that given the way their defense has been.
Yeah, the Bengals defense is awful.
Yeah, which is that's probably the biggest surprise for me. I didn't expect them to be awful. So the Saints were more testy. I think now, at Patriots was always a win. At Raiders would have given me pause because it has. They've lost 3 in a row in Vegas, but that team is, 1 foot in the grave, 1 foot on a banana peel. Like they're ready to just, it's kind of over on the season for them.
I'm sure you did, but did you see Max Crosby's quote after the game?
I don't think so.
So he was asked by Tashawn Reed, I think it was, of The Athletic, how he prepared for last week with all of the Devontae stuff going on. And he basically was like, it is what it is. This is the shit I've dealt with every single year in my career here. And like, this is just kind of business as usual for us in this building.
Oh man.
It's just like, so like as a Chargers fan, it's hilarious. But at the same time, it's like, and he's dealt with a lot of
He has,
toxicity in his time as a Raider.
yeah, no. So he was pre-Gruden, I believe, or right when they got Gruden.
He was, I think they were like the second draft class of Gruden.
Oh, okay.
But he dealt with all of that. He dealt with moving to
Yeah,
Vegas. He dealt with
the player
Josh
issues,
McDaniels.
McDaniels. Oh man.
And
Yeah.
now
No,
Wilkins is hurt. So
yeah, no, yeah, his running mate is Tyree Wilson, which is fine. It's just like he's never had much help on that defense.
yeah,
The whole time he's been there. And they finally get Wilkins. He's hurt. But hey, if you want to give up and get yourself cut and then join the Chargers, that's fine by me.
yeah. As Kevin points out, 5 weeks in and it's the same old Raiders. It really is.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there. So I predicted 10-7 before the season. I still am in that kind of range, potentially like 9-8, depending on how things go this week in particular. Has that changed at all for you? Or are you still kind of thinking that's the range that they'll see?
Yeah, I'm the win total kind of depends on how they do this week in terms of who's healthy, who comes back healthy. If it's, and it doesn't seem like it will be, but if it's 2 more weeks of Alt needing to recover and 2 more weeks or 3 weeks of Rashawn needing to recover, okay, then like we have a different conversation. But it seems like they're pretty close to returning or at least being in full. I still have them about 10-7 because obviously it has nothing to do with the defense. The defense has exceeded my expectations based on how I thought about them before the season. Offense is still trying to figure it out. Their quarterback's hurt. There's still injuries. And unfortunately, special teams has not been a standout group for them lately. So they are only really 1 for 3 on all the phases of football. So I'd say 10-7. But I feel more confident. Like I can go through their games and give more reasons why they would win those games compared to before the season. But I still think 10-7. There's attrition will happen. Something will happen. An injury will happen. A Chargers thing might happen. So
Chargers
10-7. 10-7. And honestly, that's going to be might be a pretty good record in the AFC this year.
Yeah.
Get them maybe even like the 6th seed.
Yeah, 10-7, I think has a good chance of being the 6th seed or maybe even the 5 seed. I think, again, the Steelers, I would kind of have penciled in as the 5 seed right now, but they might be going back to Russell Wilson. I don't know. The schedule is difficult. So the rest of the AFC, the division winners, I think, are very clear at this point in time. Like the top 4 teams are the top 4 teams. Everything else, I think, is very much up for grabs. So I think 10-7 feels fair. This week in particular, if the offensive guys can come back, so that means Slater, Alt, DJ Chark, if they all come back, I think they have a good chance of winning this week. But the Broncos defense is so difficult of a matchup right now for an offense that can't really push the ball downfield, has offensive line injuries, has quarterback injuries. If everybody's healthy, I feel like they can score enough to beat Bo Nix. Like that's really what it comes down to. But this Broncos defensive line is nasty. So this week I think is a much more difficult matchup than people are kind of giving it credit for because they have Bo Nix, and I understand that. But we'll get into some of the specifics on Thursday. This defensive line for the Broncos is nasty. Vance Joseph blitzes at the highest rate in the league. If the Chargers offensive line is not healthy, it's going to create some problems for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Surtain, one of them was a gimme last week. I don't know where Minshew was throwing that football, but Surtain is he's awesome. It sucks. I don't know how the Broncos keep finding great defensive backs, really great defenses in general. They can't seem to figure out quarterback, but by golly, they have a good defense every freaking year. So unfortunately, will be difficult at Denver, of course. Bummer there.
Yeah. And listen, man, Jim Harbaugh, if he can reverse the Denver luck, then we know that this is only going to strengthen their case that much more. So if they can win this week, that really, really opens up the rest of the season for them. So I think we're kind of on the same page. 9-8, 10-7, very realistic. Playoff picture, very realistic. This offense has got to get right, though. Obviously, we've talked a lot about that the past week or so-ish, and we will continue to talk about it. Hopefully, they have a good week this week. We'll see what happens. All right, before we get to the rest of our conversation here, of course, I have to tell you guys about our friends over at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. Today is the debut of the NHL season. The Utah Hockey Club are officially a thing. After we finish recording here, I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to watch hockey in October for the first time in my life. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of fun. It's a new experience for me. And PrizePicks has you covered with all of the NHL stuff, along with all of the NFL stuff, the end of the baseball postseason, the end of the WNBA season, the beginning of the NBA season. They got you covered on everything. They have great specials. They'll have crossover specials for NFL and NBA coming up in no time. It is a great, great time. Great way to get in on the action. You can go to prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty for a deposit match up to $100. And it does help support the show. So you can go in and earn yourself some extra cash, as well as support the Guilty as Charged podcast. We do really appreciate that. Again, that is prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty at checkout.
Wow. So today is the day I found out Utah had a hockey team. I had absolutely no idea. I'm looking it up. Sounds like their name, Utah Hockey Club, is temporary. So we'll see. But yeah. All right. Go UHC or whatever.
UHC. They had what's his name? Shambuzi? Is that his name?
I don't know.
Anyways, there was like a I just totally dated myself. Anyways, the name is temporary. They were not able to secure naming rights in time because they were purchasing the team from the former Arizona Coyotes franchise. And so we're pretty sure it's going to be the Yeti. The Yeti are going to be their mascot. Their colors are fantastic. I love the black and powder blue combination. So it's a very easy transition for me. Utah Armadillos. There's no armadillos in Utah, I don't think, that I know of. But yeah, so it's a lot of fun. I'm excited to get into hockey for the first time ever. No, we're not doing the Utah Soakers. This is not Pat McAfee. No, not at all.
I get that jersey. I'll tell you what, man. I threw out the signed Herbert one and then put a Utah Soakers up there.
Utah Soakers, yeah. There were some other interesting names, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna be the Yeti based off of like how they did like a fan poll, and that was far and away the top choice, and so that's cool. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Utah Yeti sounds good.
Yeah, they're working on getting a Major League Baseball team there too. So Salt Lake City on the come up, baby. You'd love to see it.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to some of these player conversations. We wanted to do this as kind of a way to take some stock here, based on like who's on the roster. We usually see this where the bye week happens, and then somebody kind of gets healthy, somebody else is not healthy, kind of takes their spot. And so we're going to talk about some players who might be on the rise, if you will, to close out the rest of the season. So Tyler, when you're talking about somebody who might be close to a breakout, somebody who's not getting enough attention or love, where did your mind first go here?
All right, I'll give you the good answer and then the stupid answer that I actually want to go with, that people are going to hate me for. So the right answer might be Will Dissly, because he's actually statistically very strong, and I don't think he'll have 1,000 yards by any means, but I think you look at what he's done, and he's very top 10 in several categories. Obviously, he was first in yards per route run, but then what was his quote? What was Charlie Kollar's quote about the fat white guy?
Yeah.
So he's now ran past Will Dissly. Will Dissly, not the fastest guy on his own. He's been tremendous. I am going to absolutely go out on a limb and go down with the ship on the idea and the hope and maybe the prayer here that the guard version of Trey Pipkins actually has a bit of a breakout the rest of the season. I think the first 2 games obviously were very solid for him. I thought I didn't love Bradley Bozeman's performance. Zion was hit or miss. I thought, given, especially in the second game, Trey Pipkins having to adjust to right guard, I thought he played okay. Things didn't go as well against the Steelers, and it definitely did not go well when he turned into a tackle, when he had to become a tackle after playing a guard the entire guard the entire offseason and season up to that point. I think, because honestly, looking at most of this offense and defense and the players that are here, I kind of feel like I know what I'm going to get from most of these guys outside of, hey, DJ Chark returns and he might do well. I think Trey Pipkins actually has a shot to play well the rest of the season. And all of you can now let me know how you feel in the comments.
I mean, he is a player that a large portion of the fan base does not like for some reason, which I don't understand. If you look at his pass blocking efficiency rating when he's not playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's been really, really great. And so I understand it's
Sure.
like kind of cherry picking to isolate that one game,
Yeah.
but when he was at guard in the first half against the Steelers, I thought he was playing pretty well. And then, switching from right guard to left tackle is not an
Yeah.
easy change, especially when you're going against Nick Herbig and TJ Watt and those guys. But his pass blocking efficiency rating against the Raiders was 98.3. He only allowed one pressure. Against the Panthers, it was 100. He didn't allow any pressures.
Mm-hmm.
And then at right tackle against the Chiefs, he only allowed 2 pressures, so it was a 96.6. He's doing exactly what I would have hoped. He's playing solid, above average football, and when he's at his best, he can be a reliable one-on-one piece. And I know like everybody loves Jamari, everybody like thinks he's this awesome tackle. If you really go and watch that tape, Jamari is the one that they were consistently chipping and giving help to. Trey was on an island all game long. And outside of one rep against George Karlaftis, I thought he was fantastic. I thought he was the best version of himself. And that's who he has always been. He is a solid, reliable starter. I think he has been able to prove that at right tackle. And now he's proving that he can be that version at right guard. So we might see another game of him at right tackle. But I think we're going to see him kick back into right guard in no time. And I think he's been very good working with Joe Alt. And from a run blocking perspective, the two of them have created a lot of movement on combo blocks. It's really great to see. That relationship has kind of developed nicely. So I hope we can see it get back to that soon. So I think Trey has played really, really well outside of the 1 second half against the Steelers.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I know some of the fan base just does not like Trey Pipkins, has basically hated him since the pick because we didn't know where Sioux Falls was on a map. And trust me, we gave him
that rookie season was rough, to be fair.
Yes. I mean, until he had a good season, it was very bad. So we had every right to criticize him. But look, in the moments where he's good, let's give him some praise. And I think he'll be solid the rest of the way. I think he deserves more love than he gets. But yeah, we'll see how much longer he plays right tackle. Hopefully soon he's right guard.
Yeah. I think it's time for the fan base to reconcile their Trey Pipkins takes a little bit. I think he's been a solid quality player. I hope the Chargers keep him around. I don't see any reason why they would cut him next year. He's a quality football player who gives them depth at every single spot, basically outside of center. So just makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I kind of have two as well. I spoke about him in my individual video, but nationally, I think we're a few weeks away from Deion Henley getting like true national recognition. Robert Mays on the Athletic Football Show actually brought him up unprompted when they were talking about the Chargers defense a couple weeks ago, or that was last week actually, when he had Dane Brugler on the show. And then today, him and Deontay Lee talked about the Chargers defense, and Deontay Lee brought up Deion Henley. So it's starting to build the national media presence. Is kind of catching on that Deion Henley is a really, really high quality linebacker. The game against the Chiefs was a little dicey. There were some moments I thought where they isolated him a bit in coverage and zone coverage in particular. Their interior offensive line trio is amazing and create a lot of challenges for linebackers. But I still thought he played well, which is a great sign that in his 4th career start against the Chiefs, he can kind of still play well. And so I think he's really close to putting it all together. You know, he has the weird, like the elbow thing injury that he got injured during the Chiefs game. And so he can get healthy as well this week. So he's close. Within the fan base, everybody kind of loves Tuli Tuipulotu already, but I think he's really going to start continuing to shine again. The pass rush numbers have not been there really outside of the Chiefs game. The first 3 games, his pass rush win rate was like 2%. But a lot of that was like matchups. A lot of that was his role. A lot of that was his assignments. When you're the 3rd and 4th edge rusher, a lot of your work is the dirty work. And we even saw like Bud Dupree in an elevator role this past week have his best game of the season too. So they've asked Tuli to do a ton of dirty work. He plays the run outstanding. To me, he's one of the best edge defending run defenders in the league. Just consistently sets one of the meanest edges in the league. I think the pass rush numbers are going to come back, partially because I just don't know what Joey is going to be for the rest of the season. And if he continues to miss time, I think Thule is just going to get back to where we saw him last year. And a lot of the fan base is kind of like, where's the pass rush? Where's the pass rush? Well, a lot of that is because Joey's been in and out of the lineup, and Thule's been doing a lot of interior rushes. So I think we see Thule get back on the edge a little bit. I think we see him start producing more as a pass rusher.
Yeah, I agree. Thule's a really good call there. I at the expense of Joey playing, obviously, but I hope that Thule does break out again as a pass rusher because he's got it. He's got all the tools. So I'm curious how he's utilized post-bye, just meant to mix things up because now it's, he thought he had Joey Bosa at this point. Joey played a game and a half. And now it's okay, we have Thule. Like, what are we going to do with that? You asked me before who the first person I thought of was for this, and I did think Deion Henley. I just wasn't sure how much love we think he's been getting already. Yeah. But he is the first person I thought of because he's playing very, very well right now. I don't know what the linebacker in the NFL hierarchy is right now outside of the guy at number 1. But after that, I really do think that Henley is starting to play like a guy who's going to get recognized in that top 15 sort of range. He's playing pretty well, and I think he'll only get better. Obviously, and honestly, I don't know where you find Junior Colson on all of this, but Henley's playing great, and obviously Perriman's playing pretty well too. And they flat out think Junior Colson's the best of all of them. Obviously, Navarro Bowman thinks the world of Junior Colson and what he can do. So I'm excited for this linebacker core overall. But Henley, he's been awesome.
Yeah, I think you can make a real argument that linebacker is potentially the best position group on the team, depending how you feel about Troy Dye and Nick Niemann and stuff like that. But in terms of the starters and borderline starters, if Junior Colson gets back healthy, gets back up to speed, it's a real strength of this team. And I think Junior Colson, there's enough of a role definition between Perriman and him where they can find a good balance between those two. But Deion is calling plays. He's linebacker 1 right now for them. He's the linebacker who stays on the field. One thing I've loved to see from him is that they fully trust him in man coverage against tight ends and running backs, and that's regardless of who he is or who they're playing against. Travis Kelce, Noah Gray, he had several opportunities where he was matched up one-on-one with them and did very, very well. So he's playing the run well. He's covering well. The only thing we haven't really seen yet is his ability as a pass rusher, which I was excited to see because that was the thing that drew me to him and his college tape was what he did as a blitzer and things like that. So we haven't seen that part come together just quite yet, but he's really close. And the linebacker position in general, outside of Fred Warner, it just doesn't have a lot of guys. It's just not a position that's super strong. Roquan Smith has seemingly taken a step back this year, so there's a real chance for Deion to assert himself the back half of the season and really make a name for himself in that position.
Gosh, I'm trying to remember the NFL's top 10 linebackers heading into this season. I have the article. Give me a second. I mean, it's Werner, I'm guessing, was first. Of course.
Warner and Roquan were probably first and second.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if he'll crack that list. I don't know if half the league or half the media even know who this guy is.
Right.
But maybe they might in a few more primetime games.
Maybe they might. Yeah. Bobby Wagner still playing well is the weirdest thing ever. That doesn't make any sense to me. So
yeah.
If you look at this list, it's just it's interesting. Nick Bolton's still very good, I think. But there's a lot of young guys that are playing pretty well right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Tyler, opposite end of that conversation, who's a player that you are worried about and maybe are seeing some flashing lights that we need to talk about these players in a negative way?
Yeah, I think I'm honestly just going to apply this to the entire unit, the special teams unit, which has a lot to do with Darius Davis, obviously. He was dealing with that hamstring injury. He did not practice the 2 days going up to the Chiefs game. He did play, but he played no snaps on offense, which I think indicates that he is still dealing with that injury. But clearly he's not been himself. And he was asked today at the locker room, hey, what's going on? What needs to improve? And he said, flat out, we've talked. Ryan Ficken says we have to improve, be better on punts. I can't catch it at the 5 and stuff like that. So I think that he will be better. I expect this team to be better, the special teams unit to be better, but it has not been to start the season. I mean, they were top 5 in DVOA 2022, 2023. They're 24th right now. And one of the things that's affecting them outside of the punt returns and the Darius Davis stuff, they're giving up almost 10 yards more per kickoff return than they did last year. I think they were a top 5 or 6 unit. They gave up 17 yards per kickoff return last year. I think they're at 27.8 yards per return this year allowed.
Yeah.
I don't know how that looks league wide. Obviously, there's a whole new rule thing going on right now. So I don't know how that looks league wide, but even like the ranking is different. So even if there's a shift across the league, the Chargers have plummeted to the 25th or whatever it is in terms of yards per kickoff return. So the whole group isn't great. So for me, I think we talk about this offense so much, and the fan base talks about the offense so much. They even talk about Darius Davis quite a bit too. But this whole group is now bottom quarter of the league in special teams DVOA, which is a huge surprise.
Yeah, I mean, some of that obviously is the injuries that they have kind of dealt with, right? Like Cam Hart is playing personal punt protector. There's no Chris Rumph. There's no Nick Niemann. Shaq Quarterman is playing core 4 special team snaps off the practice squad. Blake Lynch did that this past week. So some of that is the injuries. You know, Alohi Gilman has been a core special teams player. He missed time and now he's not even doing it anymore. So some of that is the injuries, but I think there's certainly room for improvement. I'm curious, at what point does Ryan Ficken make a change at kick returner? And I think that could help Darius Davis just focusing in on returning punts and allows him to stay fresh. Maybe that allows him to kind of carve out a more of a significant role in offense too, and hand kickoff return duties to Hassan Haskins or Brendan Rice or whoever they want to give an opportunity back there. Because that, and he mentioned this, it's a lot faster. There's not a ton of space to be had, and he is kind of struggling to see things. Like I think there are at least a couple of returns that I've seen on tape where he's had the opportunity to kind of cut one way, make a big play, and he just keeps riding to the sideline. So I don't know what's being coached. I don't know what Ryan Ficken's strategy has been, but I know that Darius Davis has not looked like his same old self from last year that we love to see. I mean, like right now, you know, before the season, we would kind of like joked, oh, like what's the over under on return touchdowns for Darius this year? And now, like, I don't even think we see any. Like, it's just been such a struggle for him.
Yeah, huge surprise. I don't remember how many snaps he was playing on offense last year. I don't know if that expanded role has taken away from some of his focus or the rule change or just bad luck, injuries, or whatever it is. I could see them making a change. They've quietly been churning the receiver group. Some of that is due to injuries, obviously, and uncertainty with Josh Palmer. Chark has been out, but they've quietly been churning the roster on the practice squad to get some receivers. So we'll see if there is a change. I'm all for it. Now, I don't know where you find the ability to add someone. Is it just 3 straight elevations for Rager and see what happens? I don't know. I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind them making a change. I'd trust them to make a change, especially if they still want to keep his offensive role intact.
Yeah. It's a bummer to see, but I think if you're going to be this poor in kickoff returns, I think eventually you just got to make a change. So we'll see what happens there. My player here is really my next 2 things that we're going to talk about are both about the Chargers defensive line room. The first conversation I think needs to be had about Justin Eboigbe. I'm a little concerned about like what the plan is for his development and like his potential role for this team, because he made his season debut on Sunday as the 4th edge rusher because Joey Bosa was injured. And I'm like, okay, I can kind of understand that. He did a lot of 4-eye stuff at Alabama where he played kind of like a pseudo edge rusher role. And the Chargers, maybe they wanted to save Trayvon Morris-Brash's elevations for a little bit more of a serious situation. Okay, I can kind of understand that. But then he didn't play a single snap, and that kind of raised my eyebrows a bit. Not that I expected him to play a ton on the edge, but I was like, okay, if they're going to make him active, like he should probably see some snaps, right? And then he doesn't play at all. And then also Scott Matlock only logged 1 defensive snap against the Chiefs. And so that just was like, I don't understand what's going on here. And then so I think player to be concerned about is both of those 2. It's Justin Eboigbe and it's Scott Matlock, because I don't know what the role is on defense for them. Obviously, they love Scott Matlock, the fullback. I think some of that is a little overkill, but he's had his snaps decrease on defense every single week of the season so far, to the point where he logs one single snap against the Chiefs. And Justin Eboigbe, I'm like, okay, if there's no Matlock, then Eboigbe should just slot right in, right? And then he doesn't play a single snap either. So the defensive trajectory of those two players, I think, is something to be monitored over the rest of the season, because they're not playing a whole lot right now. So Eboigbe was somebody I was really excited about in the draft. I thought it made a lot of sense when they snagged him. I'm not giving up hope, obviously. I think a lot of players kind of get a redshirt season as rookies and then they kind of figure it out. Maybe that's happening here. But it's a concern to me where you're going to be on the roster and you're going to be the fifth defensive tackle who can't play ahead of the fullback who's not playing on defense either. So I'm just concerned. We'll see what happens. It's a long season. An injury could force their hand, and they could have to play him down the road at some point too. But it was very curious to me that the two of them saw one combined snap on defense against the Chiefs.
Yeah, that is definitely concerning. I'm surprised with Matlock, because at least he was like, has been active, has been playing. So that number is definitely a surprise. Eboigbe, early on in the offseason, I think in training camp, we all raised our eyebrows when Jim Harbaugh said, yep, 4 guys are locked into spots. Here's the 4 guys. And then everyone else is fighting for that 5th spot. And that included Eboigbe fighting for that 5th spot. And we went, what? Like, the guy you just drafted pretty early in the draft, all things considered, he's still fighting for a spot? What's going on there? And so far, it just really seems like they haven't figured out a way to get him on the field. Obviously, he's been inactive. And in a game where I don't see why you couldn't have used him, they didn't use him. And so it's a surprise that he's not seeing anything at this point. If you told me Matlock's snaps are being reduced, I'd say, okay, so Eboigbe's playing, right? Like, he's the guy that would be the next guy. They drafted him, feel good about him. Nothing. So we'll see if that changes post-buy, obviously. Like, this is the point where we're talking about like the pre-buy versus post-buy stuff. So maybe this is the inflection point that changes things. But I'm surprised. He was, I think, of the players the Chargers drafted, I think we universally agreed Tarheeb still was the biggest question mark. But after that, I think the next quote-unquote worst grade was Eboigbe. There's a couple of things that went into that. Not that we disliked the pick. It made sense. But there were just some question marks, which did include, obviously, the injury history. I don't think that's playing any factor here. But yeah, definitely a surprise. I am concerned that this ends up being a big swing and a miss for them. But it's early.
Yeah, and a lot can change. Like I said, if his role never comes to fruition this year, then it sucks. But if we get to, the next few weeks and they're just playing the 4 defensive linemen and they're still not playing Eboigbe or Matlock there, then I think we'll know. And I think we could see them maybe try and be aggressive at that spot and go swing for a trade deadline or something like that. So just something to keep an eye on. Okay, the last conversation we're going to have here is something that we want to see change post-buy. This can be a schematic thing. This can be a rotational thing. We can have multiple conversations here, but what was your first instinct about something that we wanted to see change after the bye?
There were so many different ways we could go here. I went with just a very simple one that we've been saying for a while, so I hate to rehash things we've already discussed, but Kamani Vidal needs to see the field if this is what we're getting from Gus Edwards. If Gus Edwards isn't dealing with a health issue and hasn't been dealing with a health issue and it's purely performance, we've got to see more of Vidal at this point. I'll even settle for Haskins if that's what they want to go with, because Gus Edwards right now, on just one more attempt than him last year, he's worse in yards after contact per attempt and has fewer first downs than Isaiah Spiller did last year on one more attempt. I think Spiller had 6 first downs and Edwards is at 1 or 2. Or excuse me, missed tackles forced. I think Spiller had 5 or 6 and Edwards has 1. But the numbers are not good. And if you're Gus Edwards and you're averaging fewer yards after contact per attempt than Isaiah Spiller, I don't love that, obviously. So it's not great. If it were an injury this whole time and he comes back refreshed and ready to go, awesome. But right now, it's not looking great for him. And I think you shared it or Alex shared it. There's a graph going around that talks about, yards per attempt on perfectly blocked plays.
Yeah, I
and
was
Gus
gonna bring
Edwards
that
is
up.
one of
Yeah.
the worst in the league. J.K. Dobbins is surprisingly also not great in perfectly blocked plays. Apparently, you just have to not block for J.K. Dobbins, and he does better. But Gus Edwards, the good news is we finally got a running back right next to Brees Hall in a category. The bad news is both Brees Hall and Gus Edwards are doing really poorly on perfectly blocked plays, which is a concern. So you're not great after contact. You can't even run well on perfectly blocked plays. It's rough.
Yeah, I mean, the good news for J.K. Dobbins is that he is averaging 6 yards per carry on the perfectly blocked runs. It's just, he's not creating a ton after contact. So, yeah, that graphic is from the account Throw the Damn Ball. If you don't follow him, he does great work from a data standpoint. All of these graphs, right? You want to avoid being in the bottom left category because that's like the category that's not very good. That bottom left category is filled with Deontay Foreman, Zamir White, Alexander Madison. So that tells you what the Raiders are dealing with right now. DeAndre Swift, Zach Moss. I choose not to see that part. Brees Hall, and then Gus Edwards. So regardless of whatever metric you're looking at, Gus Edwards has not been good. And there's still a lot of the fan base where like he's the physical hammerhead. Well, it doesn't matter if he's averaging 2 yards a carry. So being physical and being big, it has zero impact on the game if you're just consistently putting your team behind the chains, and that's what's happening right now. So I hope it gets better, but the leash needs to be short because the Chargers, like we talked about earlier, they have a very manageable stretch of games coming up, and if they just keep on like pounding their head against the wall and doing these 2-yard Gus Edwards runs, it's going to be tough. And I think Vidal has the perfect kind of skill set here to match J.K. Dobbins, where he can create explosive plays, he can create yards after contact. We only saw him in the one preseason game, but he was like the most efficient tackle breaker in the preseason of any running back in the league. So the talent is there. I understand why he's not playing right now because Hassan Haskins is the special teams demon and all that stuff.
Sure.
But if Gus Edwards has negative impact on the offense, what are we doing here? So Vidal, I think, should be on the field sooner rather than later if Gus Edwards cannot figure it out.
Yeah, and look, every time Gus Edwards jumps onto the field, is anyone thinking that he's going to catch a pass? No, he has 2 yards so far through 4 games this season.
Right.
So he's projected for what, 8.5 on the season. Not that I think that'll hold, but there's no threat of explosion, of breaking away, forcing missed tackles, catching a pass. I mean, once Gus Edwards is on the field, they're probably running it. It's probably getting 2 yards. Pray you don't have a false start before that. It's just not good for them right now. They can't stay ahead of the chains with Gus Edwards.
Yeah, it's not great. The player I want to see more of in the second half of this season, it feels weird saying that, in the post-buy stretch of the season, is Tier Tart, the defensive tackle, who's kind of the 4th defensive tackle. Right now, he has been their most efficient pass rushing defensive tackle on a per snap basis. He has a pass rush productivity rating of 10.0, and he has pass rush win rate of 10.0. So he's consistent across both formats. Those are both the top marks in the league, or not in the league, excuse me, on the roster at that position group. So I need to see more of him. He's playing really well against the run as well. I think I understand why Puna Ford and Otito Ogbonia are getting the bulk of the snaps right now. They're both doing a fantastic job of pushing the pocket. They're playing the run extremely well. Otito Obonia's breakout has been really fun to watch so far this season. Obviously, we've talked about Puna a bunch. He's been absolutely awesome. But Tart just gives them a bit of a different pass rusher, and they need that right now. The Chargers, as we've talked about, are creating pressures at a very like below average rate, which is not great to see. Again, some of that is Joey Bosa missing time, but the other players around Khalil Mack have to start picking things up. Otherwise, this pass rush is just going to get stagnant, and people are going to start double teaming Khalil. They're going to start sending chip help and running back help and everything like that at Khalil, and then nothing's going to change. So playing Tart more specifically as a pass rusher, I think will help. He's just more dynamic than Puna and Otito are in that regard. And I think they are missing an interior pass rusher really, really badly. Unfortunately, Morgan Fox has kind of taken a step back in that regard this year. So Tart needs to be that guy that they need to play more often, and I think that could just kind of elevate the defense to a slight step up from a pass rushing standpoint.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I'm curious if that is a change. Like you said, I get why the starting to get the bulk of their snaps. But based on the way Tart is playing, yeah, I'm game for more snaps. So they've been starting duo, and then Fox is the third guy, and then they've had just the other fourth guy sort of rotate between Matlock and Tart. Is that kind of how they've been doing it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Morgan Fox scaled back a bit does help him with some of his efficiency. I think he's actually technically still higher than everyone but Tart in run stop rate, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, he is getting a lot of run stops, and Morgan Fox is playing well. I'm not here to say like, oh, Morgan Fox is a bad player by any means. He's still playing well, and he's playing the run at a much higher rate than we're used to seeing him do. And he actually was on Michael Brocker's podcast and was saying that like they've kind of the Chargers didn't really have a ton of true pass rushing opportunities against the first three teams, and then what we saw in the fourth game was they had a ton of pass rushing opportunities, and everybody consistently across the board kind of had like their best day as a pass rush.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So some of that is like who they've played, the game plans, etc. But his pass rush win rate the last 3 years, and even going back to the Rams, he's generally like a pass rush win rate guy around like 15-16%. Pass rush productivity is around like 10 to 12, and right now it's like not even half that. So he's not impacting as much as he is used to either. But the script has not been kind from a pass rushing standpoint for them.
Yeah, but I'm all for more Tart. Sounds fun.
Yeah, and if you're not going to have a fifth one, play the fourth one a lot. You know,
correct.
You don't want the main three just playing a ton of snaps. You got to even things out with that fourth one, I would think. All right, Tyler. Any other final thoughts before we head out?
We have a super chat from Joe Cruz. A win after a bye week is the sign of a good head coach, especially against a rookie quarterback. Yes, post-bye win would be awesome. Against Bo Nix would be great. I contend, and I'll say it out loud, and I'm sure someone will clip it out and roast me when they lose. I think Bo Nix stinks. I watched him play the Raiders, and he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn for the entire 2/3 of that game. And then the Raiders decided to Raider, and then things were simplified for him. Things opened up. But watching Bo Nix, I thought, yep, Jesse Minter's going to welcome that man to hell, and I'm excited to watch. Because if that Raiders defense gave you a problem, have fun this week.
Yeah, we saw what Jesse Minter's plan did to Bryce Young, and I think it'll have a similar effect. This has the makings of a very low-scoring game, I think, is what we're saying. But we'll get to more specifics there. But yeah, if the offense can be healthy this week, I think they have a very good chance of winning. But they gotta get their guys back. Otherwise, I'm going to be a little nervous.
Yep.
But appreciate the super chat from Joe Cruz. And it is a good sign of a head coach if they can win after the bye. So I'm sure they'll have some things, up their sleeve for the Broncos. And I'm excited to see what those are. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. We will be back on Thursday for our full preview of this Chargers Broncos game. It has been kind of a long week without an actual Chargers football game. So I'm excited to get back to that, watch the film, and I'll have a more normal routine for sure. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. This has been the Guilty as Charged podcast. As always, bolts up.